Hello and welcome to Festive Tech Calendar 2021, my presentation on an SVG Christmas tree. My name is Bob Fornal. I'm with Leading Edge out of Columbus, Ohio. I'm a senior solutions developer with quite a number of years under my belt. And I thought this would be an interesting exercise to kind of play with a pattern that I've used in the past. So I'll do a special thank you to Festive Tech Calendar for letting me do this. Present this topic to you. So first thing I want to take a look at, our repo is at github.com/bob-fornal/Christmas tree. This application is actually deployed at bob-fornal.github.io/Christmas tree. And real quickly here, we can take a quick peek. This is going to be the final result of the tree we're going to do. And there's a little more to it. I'll show you that when we get towards the end of the presentation. So taking the first step in here, I want to take a look at what I call an overlay design. So in reality, what I put together is two SVGs. So what I'm representing here is the upper SVG, which has a transparency, and that would be showing what the tree would look like. Now, if that outer area, instead of being orange or tan, whatever it is in this case, were white to match the background, or in this case, a dark gray to match the background, it would make the tree look almost seamlessly on the page. I left it in to kind of show how this overlay design works. Like I said, it's two SVGs. You've got the front one with the transparency. You've got one in the back. In this case, I kind of put a handle on it to give you, show you the idea of what's occurring. So by moving that one in the back up and down, and the outer div cuts off any overlay, any part of the image that goes outside that div. It allows us to do something kind of like a percentage bar. And I first started using this design way back in the day when I worked with a company called Select Sires. And we used it to show a percentage of a tank that had been filled. Later on, I used a similar design to do percentage of a beer keg that had been filled. In this case, this is currently set up to check the current date. And so from the 1st of December, it will show the lowest part of it. And when we hit the 25th of December, the tree should be completely green. Nothing too fancy, just enough to kind of show what we can do. Okay. So SVG setup, like I said, there are two SVGs. So what you look at here, up in this top bar, we have an ID for the sliding box. Okay. This is the one that's in the back. This is the one that's the simpler one of the two. If we look, it's just, it's got a stroke white. It's got a path, it's got a fill color, that's the green. It's got a height and width of 400 by 600. Okay, so as we look down at our second one, and this is the one that's on top, this one's 400 by 600 as well. Okay, the difference here, here's where the cool part comes in, is we have this fill rule, which is even and odd. Okay, so as we put paths in, starting with this capital M, the first one, the E, the odd one, gets a fill. The next one, the even one, 1, 2, the even one, is transparent at that level, and you could do multiples. Okay, so there are ways that we could fill and allow transparency again over and over again. But in this case, I did that basic fill is gold. So as we look at our final product here, this is the gold out here. Okay, and what you're seeing here is that green in the background there is that's a transparency. We're seeing the actual SVG behind it, the solid green behind it. Okay. So the tree itself was a little trickier, and I spent a little more time putting this card together so that we would have something to look at. I started, and what you saw in the code earlier is that we started with a 200, over 200 down 20. We then went over 30 or 50 more to 250, down to 100, back to 100. Okay, and so I essentially followed that pattern down the tree, extending the height a little bit to give me this tree shape and wrap it all the way around. And actually, one of the ones that we have to remember to do is always come back to the beginning, to that 200, 220, especially if we want to do a border like this. So the stroke width, if we had stopped at 150, 100 as we came all the way around all these points, if we had stopped here, that stroke would not have filled anything in here because it doesn't know to close that gap. It closes the gap in terms of the transparency. It doesn't close the gap in terms of the stroke path, the route that we have available there. Okay. So there was a lot of math involved in this and a lot of mistakes that occurred as I put this thing together. And thankfully, you've got the benefit of the doubt, and we don't have to jump all through all of that and then see all the mistakes again. But what I have in the repo, and this is where we'll come in here, is we're going to take a look at code. Okay, so in iteration one, we're going to do an HTML overview. We're going to look through the CSS basics that we put into place. I'm going to do a quick overview of the JavaScript that I've got in place, and that's about 50% of the JavaScript. You won't see that the JavaScript again till the end. The outline of the tree is in iteration 2, where I put that green, darker green border around it, put the star in place, put the footer in place. In iteration 3, we put the ribbons on and add ornaments. In iteration 4, we animate the ornaments. Okay, in this case, I used an SVG animation as opposed to a CSS animation. The ribbons wind up being a CSS type animation. Also in iteration 4, we reposition the slider. If you run any of the first 3 iterations, the slider's across the bottom. And in this case, with this being the tree, it made position. It made a better product having it on the side. Made more sense. And then finally, I did some final ribbon adjustments. There are some images I added in and an extra interaction. We'll take a look at that as well. So let's jump into the code and see what we have there. Give me 1 second. There we go. All right. So basic HTML. These are the 2 SVGs that we saw earlier. They haven't changed. Okay. These are those weird numbers you saw on the tree. Okay. So the 250, 20, or sorry, 220, 250, 100 to 220, 100, making that shape of the tree. Okay. So it's essentially cut out. It's like a cookie cutter. Okay. Additionally, in here, we've loaded a style sheet. We've loaded a tree JavaScript file. We have an input slider. Okay, so this is a type range. And we have a label. Later on, the label gets dropped as we go vertical with that range slider. Okay, our minimum's 100, our maximum 600. So what you're looking at is the height of the tree. We essentially chopped off the bottom 100 pixels to have the base of the tree. Then we step by 5, which just, I could have stepped by 10, I could have stepped by 20, could have stepped by 1. 5 is what I picked to use for that. There's no particular reason why. Okay, I'm going to be closing these files out as we go through. This is off of iteration 0. So there's not much functionality at that point in the CSS. Oops, we jumped a little there. In the CSS, we have an outer wrapper that centers things. We have a wrapper inside that's an inline block. The inline block allows us to put the slider to the side. We got a width and a height. That's the biggest thing there. Okay, and remember we had that overflow hidden that I talked about. So it actually is wrapper space blocking in the HTML. Let's go back, take a quick peek at that. There we go. So it's 2 classes assigned. Okay. We have some stuff on the label, some stuff on the controls, the sliders. We have this path. It's not used till later. We'll take a look at that. Well, let's take a look at that now, essentially what it does. But what we're doing with the path is I set a stroke dash array length and an offset. There's no pointer on it, on that path itself. So the path becomes the ribbons on the tree. And it fires what's called the first animation, which is the stroke dash offset. So it's going from the offset of 100 to the offset of 0. It's linear, forward, infinite. I had to actually just kind of play with those numbers to get a really nice looking sliding feel to those ribbons. Okay. So we keep jumping over that interaction. I don't want to go there yet. Tree.js is our next one. Built this on ready. This is essentially the same as jQuery's the document ready that we use there. So it essentially is looking to see, is everything loaded? Is everything complete at that point in time? We fire callback. Okay. And this allows us to not execute any code until that point in time that we need it. We have a set style function that allows us to move the sliding box up and down based on whatever value you put in. So 600 minus the value puts it in the position, and we handle the slider event, which guess what it does? It sets the style. It gets the value and sets the style. Here's the check date that I talked about earlier that essentially looks for the 1st to the 25th of January. And again, is setting the style based on the date. So when we load that in the 1st to 25th of January, you'll see that change. Outside of that range, it fills it completely. Okay. And then the on ready, when it fires, passes this function in, and we set up, we get a hold of the sliding box and the slider. The slider itself being the actual draggable slider. And we tell it on the slider to listen to and fire the handle slider event function when it's changed. And then on the check date, the check date function gets executed, so we make sure that we've set our sliding box into the correct position. So second iteration, I wanted to get a little fancier there. And as we mentioned on the slides, we wanted to go through and add a few pieces in. So we added in an outline on the tree. And the fun part, if you look at the outline on the tree, is as we select this, you'll see it highlighting up above. It's the exact same path. Okay, so I just added to that transparent cutout. I followed the exact same path of the transparent cutout. I give it a stroke. I give it a stroke width. It's filled transparent, so it doesn't affect the transparency, but does give us that slightly better, darker green border. Added a star at the top, which is a polygon, and yeah, it was just more messing with numbers to make sure I got that right. We actually did eventually add a stroke color on that, setting it to yellow. It looked a little weird without that. And then the footer is just the base of the tree. Again, filled brown there, and we added a little more in later on to make that look really good. Okay, so not much else changed in the iteration 2, just getting a couple pieces into place. So if we go look at iteration 3, close out 2, we still have the outline of the tree, the start of the footer. We added the ribbons in, okay? And just playing with this, and the fun part with the ribbon is where we use the M and the C. The C means to make it curved, okay? M is setting that initial point. Following a curved path to give those tree strokes a little, and let's go back over, take a quick peek at that so we can see what we're looking like. Okay, so we're starting at a point. We're following a curved implementation. To do a curve, you need a couple of points in there. That's why those are a little bit longer than just point to point. It's not going from here to here directly, okay? So we go back and look at the code on that. Your curve takes 1, 2, 3 points. To make it active, you can do more than 3. I wasn't going to go crazy with it, okay? And then the ornaments are down here, and I left these as a closed circle. You can certainly do a slash here to indicate that this is a self-closing attribute, or sorry, element. But there's a reason we do that. We use that later on for our animation of these. Okay, so essentially these are XY coordinates with a stroke around and a fill. Okay, nothing real complicated. It gives us a circle of radius of 10 in all of the cases. Okay, so that's iteration 3. Looking at iteration 4, here's the cool part that's been added in iteration 4, which is this animation. Okay, your repeat count's indefinite, so it repeats over and over and over again. In this case, we're going red, maroon, red, red over 0.8 seconds. And what I did was I did a 0.8 second and a 0.12 second, and varying those up and changing the colors around. So if you see, like on the second set here, these are pink and purple, these are silver and blue, and the durations are different all over the place, just to kind of, so that it's not, I don't want it to look like it's just flashing circles. I want them to have a little less, to look a little less fixed in cycle, a little more randomized, I guess is probably a better way of doing it. Okay, so this is an animation that's actually built in to the pattern rather than the styling or CSS styling, where we saw on the path where we made the ribbon animate, this is CSS animation. Okay. So here we are able to apply an animation on those elements of the SVG. Okay. So then if we come look at the final iteration, I'm closing down the slider portion and the cutout SVGs because I put two images in place. Okay. And if you look at the names, you're probably going to guess what they are. We have a train, we have Santa, they're silhouettes. Okay. My thought is I wanted something a little more active to occur on our tree. And let's go take a look at that. And then we'll come back and see how it was implemented. Okay, so we've got this animation that's CSS, okay, on the ribbons. We've got these ornaments that have animation built into the SVG itself. We have this slider that as we slide it and move it, notice what it does to the background, okay? So this is actually, this SVG goes way down here, but it's cutting it off, okay, based on the overflow, okay? So a lot of functionality in there, but here's the really cool part, I think. Put this down here just because I don't know why, because I won't do that. So as we click, we get to see a silhouetted animation of Santa go by. If we click again, doesn't matter where we click, get to see a silhouetted animation of a train. And it's delayed. It has a time frame that it runs, and you can't click until the time frame's up, but you'll see the other one come through, okay? Nothing super fancy, and also I added a little piece here on the base to kind of clean that look up there. So let's see how we did that. Okay. I want to go to code. Sorry, wrong place. There we go. Code. So we put the train and we put the Santa images in. They're in place. Okay. We have this class image, which is probably what we're going to look at for the SVG, or sorry, the CSS. So let's go in there and look. And somewhere down in here, oh wait, that was up above. I was already there. We have image. Okay. So image starts out with an absolute position. Okay. Bottom of 100 pixels, so it's 100 off the bottom, and left at 100%. So make sure that it's from the left 100% over, so it's off the right side of the tree. Okay, on an image move, it fires the animation that takes 3 seconds called slide in. Slide in goes from the left 100 to the left minus 100, so it's moving to the other side, so that the far right side of the image is off the far left side of the tree itself, okay? Which is what makes it slide from left to right. Triggering that is based on this interaction, and interaction, I reuse that on ready. If we look in the HTML, this is loaded after that one, so everything works fine there. And we grab the train, we grab the Santa, we have a handler, okay? That handler, we add a click event to it, and it fires the handle event function. In the handle event function, okay, if the path, the event path includes slider. Okay, so event path is a string, or sorry, is an array of all the elements from HTML on down to wherever it was clicked. Okay, if it includes slider, if somebody's dragged the slider, we don't want it to do anything. We only want the click this to happen if they click somewhere else. Okay. We check is active. So is active is a variable we set so that when it's running, we don't want it to re-trigger it again. Okay. We set active to true. If we've made it past those two conditions, we take the active image, which initially the active image would be Santa. So we say Santa and toggle the class list and add move to it, which triggers that full animation from right to left. 3-second window. So we set a set timeout with a little more than a 3-second run to set it in, to set is inactive back to false, to toggle move, which turns the move, takes the move off that image. And if we're Santa, we make it train. And if we're train, then we make it Santa. Nothing real complicated there, but looks kind of cool. Okay. So let's go back to the HTML real quick. And notice we have that interaction JavaScript that got loaded in. There's 2 images of the train and the Santa, and these are all in the project here. And let's go back and take a quick look at our slide deck, make sure I got everything. So in the iteration 1, we looked at the HTML, we looked at the CSS basics, we looked at the JavaScript overview. Iteration 2, the outline of the tree, we got the star, we got the footer put in place. Iteration 3, we got the ribbons and ornaments put in place. Iteration 4, we put in the ornament animation, we repositioned the slider, we put it on the right side vertical. If you were to run iterations 1, 2, or 3, the slider's on the bottom and it's got a label, okay? In the final, we did the ribbon adjustments, we looked at the images with the CSS animation, and we looked at interactions, the interactions.js file that triggers that interaction, okay? So again, going back to the beginning there, we have this at GitHub, bob-fornal at GitHub.io Christmas tree. Okay, and this is the tree, and it does all this really cool stuff, I think. Mostly in this case playing around, but having some fun with the holidays. Okay. So I want to say a thank you to the Festive Tech Calendar folks for allowing me to do this presentation. I hope you got something out of this. The repo is available for you to take a look at. And I hope if you've got some interest in playing with SVGs that this helps a little bit. Thank you for your time and enjoy and have a Merry Christmas.